Good morning, students. Welcome to our online class. This is your second period, and the subject is history. Students, today in this period, I will continue the same chapter, or I can say same theme, that is theme 15. Theme 15, that is framing the constitution. Theme 15 with the title framing the constitution. So this theme I will continue in today's class. Students, in the previous period, we stopped in the middle of that 1.2, that is the dominant voices in the Indian Constitution. So 1.2, the dominant voices, which is in page number 409, half of the paragraph we have completed. So from there once again I'll continue. Okay, students? So please be attentive towards the video. Listen to my lecture carefully. Students, already I told you the total members in the Constituent Assembly were 300 members. So there are total 300 members in the Constituent Assembly. Out of these 300 members, 6 members played a very important or vital role. Out of 300 total members of the Constituent Assembly who were elected from various provinces or provincial legislatures, out of all, 6 important members played an important role. So you want to know who are they? So listen carefully. Out of six, 3 were namely Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and Babu Rajendra Prasad. And all these 3 leaders were belonging to Congress or Indian National Congress. So out of 6, already mentioned 3 names. And all the 3 members, they belongs to the Congress party. Namely, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and Dr. Rajendra Prasad. It was Nehru who moved the crucial resolution, that is Objectives Resolution. I repeat, it is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who moved the crucial Objectives Resolution in the Constituent Assembly. You will be asked, who was the man, who was the person who moved the crucial Objectives Resolution in the Constituent Assembly? That is Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. As well as in the resolution, Pandit Nehru suggested there should be one flag for India. A horizontal tricolor flag should be there for India with 3 important colors on it, namely a white, dark green, and saffron. I repeat, it is Pandit Nehru ji, he passed a resolution proposing that there must be a national flag for our country India, which should be horizontal tricolor flag, which should be horizontal and have all the 3 colors tricolor, namely saffron, white, and dark green. He also suggested in the middle there should be one wheel with blue color. Okay, I repeat, a tricolor flag should be the national flag of India. It should be a horizontal tricolor flag with saffron, white and dark green, equal in proportion, all the colors should be equal in proportion. Okay, at the same time, with a wheel in the center with navy blue color. There should be a wheel in the middle of the flag with a navy blue color. Similarly, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, this person always worked behind the scene. He worked behind the scene. Okay, he played a very key role in drafting all the several reports. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he always worked behind the screen. And he is the person who drafted all important reports of the Constituent Assembly, and also always worked to reconcile the people who are different in opinion. Those people who were different in opinions in the Constituent Assembly, all such people are being reconciled or counseled by this Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Similarly, Rajendra Prasad, he is the president of Constituent Assembly. He was the president of Constituent Assembly, and he always participated in all the debates and discussions that were held in the Constituent Assembly. Babu Rajendra Prasad, who was elected as the president of Constituent Assembly, Babu Rajendra Prasad, who was elected as the president of Constituent Assembly, who convened the meetings of the Constituent Assembly, who participated in all debates and discussions of Constituent Assembly. This person always gave equal opportunity to all the members to speak in the assembly. Now, besides these three people, among the six, another person called Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Actually, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he was a famous economist and also lawyer during British rule. Okay, he was an economist. He is a lawyer. And during the British rule, Ambedkar always criticized, or I can say Ambedkar always politically criticized the Indian National Congress. I repeat, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, another important leader of the Constituent Assembly, okay, who was a famous lawyer and an economist. And during the period of British rule, Ambedkar had been a political opponent. He was the political opponent of Congress. But on the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, already shared that Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi both signed one agreement that is called Pune Pact. So on the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, okay, he was asked to what? He was asked at independence to join the Union Cabinet as a law minister. So when India got independence, in the interim government, on the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was appointed as the Union Cabinet Minister, that is Law Minister. So he was the first Law Minister of India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Similarly, he was also later chosen or elected as the chairman of drafting committee, the committee which is responsible to draft the Indian Constitution. Similarly, I repeat that B.R. Ambedkar was also appointed as the chairman of the drafting committee, which was given the sole responsibility to draft the Indian Constitution. Now 4 are over. Now, who are the other two members who played an important role among the 300 members of the Constituent Assembly? Now, another person was K.M. Munshi. This K. Munshi is from Gujarat. And similarly, Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer. One is K. Munshi from Gujarat. And Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer is from Madras. Both of whom gave crucial inputs in the drafting of the constitution. I mean, these two people also, K. Munshi and Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyer from Karnataka, the Tamil Nadu, both also played an important role, crucial role in drafting the Indian constitution. So these 6 members, whom I said now, these 6 members were guided by 2 important civil servants. All the 6 important members of the Constituent Assembly, whom I mentioned now. So all the 6 members, they were given vital assistance. All the 6 members of the Constituent Assembly, they were given vital assistance, important help by 2 civil servants. And among these 2, one is B.N. Rao. B.N. Rao, R-A-U. Here Rao means, see, we can call R-A-O Rao, R-O-W Rao. Okay, but here B.N. Rao, R-A-U. So he is one of the civil servant. And this person was the constitutional advisor. This, you please underline this sentence. This sentence is very, very important. B.N. Rao, who was the constitutional advisor to the government of India. So who was the constitutional advisor of the government of India? B.N. Rao. Very, very important. So B.N. Rao is another person, a civil servant, who gave vital health assistance to all the above 6 members, and he was the constitutional advisor of Indian government or government of India. And he prepared a series of background papers based on a close study of the political systems, okay, obtained from other countries. Similarly, another important civil servant name is, that is S.N. Mukherjee. He is the chief draftsman. Draftsman, D-R-A-U-G-S-T, draftsman. I mean, who helped in drafting. So the other important civil servant who gave a vital assistance to all the 6 important members of the Constituent Assembly was the chief draftsman. His name is S.N. Mukherjee, who had the ability, this person is having the ability to put a complex proposal in a clear legal language. This, what S.N. Mukherjee, who is the chief draftsman, he is having the ability, he is having the capacity, ability to put all the complex proposals in a clear legal language. So these people played an important role. Now Ambedkar himself had the responsibility. I mean, Ambedkar, who was appointed as the chairman of the drafting committee, he himself took the responsibility of drafting the Constitution of India. And this drafting of Constitution, as already mentioned, that it took nearly 3 years. I mean, exactly 2 years, 11 months, 18 days. And all these were in printed record, okay, and written form. Okay, and our Indian Constitution was, today if you want to read, they are available in the volumes. Okay, 11 bulky volumes are there. I mean, 11 big books are there. And if a student, if any person wants to study the complete Constitution of India, then he has to read, or she has to read the 11 bulky volumes. That much big is our Indian Constitution. That's why I told you it's the lengthiest one, largest one, and written form. The members of the Constituent Assembly were eloquent in expressing eloquent in expressing their sometimes very divergent points of view. I mean, the members of the drafting committee, those were members working under the leadership of B.R. Ambedkar, sometimes they were different in their views. There is no unanimity. Okay, in their presentations, we can discern many conflict ideas of India, of what language Indians should speak, and which language we can make it official language, because India is having number of languages. Number of language people are there in India. So which language can be prescribed the official language of India? Okay. Similarly, of what political and economic systems the nation should follow, which economic system that India should follow. I mean, capitalist economic system or socialist economic system or mixed economic system. So which economic system our India should follow? What values, what moral values its citizens should uphold or follow or dissolve. That means what type of moral values one should follow. So all these things are keenly discussed and then incorporated in the Indian Constitution. Now we are moving to another topic, that is the vision of the Constitution. The vision of our India's Constitution. Very, very important. Listen, students. On 13th, the vision of the India's Constitution. On 13th December 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru introduced the Objectives Revolution, which we discussed earlier. So, who introduced the Objectives Resolution in the Constituent Assembly? Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 13th December 1946. It was a momentous resolution. I mean, it should be remembered. Today also we are remembering that one. So it is a momentous resolution that outlined the defining ideals of the Constitution of Independent India. I mean, in the resolutions, it clearly defined that on what ideals our Indian Constitution is based. In that Objectives Resolution, which is passed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 13th December 1946, that momentous resolution which is passed, that is dealt with the ideals on which our Indian Constitution is based. Okay, ideals of the Constitution of Independent India, and provided the framework within which the work of the Constitution making was to proceed. Now, that resolution, that Objectives Resolution declared whatever Objectives Resolution that Pandit Nehru made, that resolution proclaimed that India to be an independent, sovereign republic. It should be an independent sovereign republic. That was mentioned in that resolution. Moreover, it also mentioned that the Constitution guaranteed its citizens justice. Indian Constitution guaranteed its citizens, all citizens, justice, equality and freedom. First, in that resolution, it mentioned that India is an independent sovereign republic. Second, that Indian Constitution guaranteed to all its citizens justice, equality and freedom, or liberty we can say, and also assured that sufficient safeguards shall be provided for minorities, because minorities, they gave the representation that their language should be, their religion should be protected. So that was also taken into consideration. Hence, in the Indian Constitution, it was also mentioned that the Constitution assured that adequate safeguards, protections for minorities, backward and tribal areas people, and also depressed and other backward class people. Indian Constitution assured that adequate safeguards shall be provided to all the minorities, backward and tribal area people, depressed caste and other backward class people. After outlining these objectives, Nehru placed the Indian experiment in a broad historical perspective. As he Nehru spoke, he said that Nehruji's mind went back to the historical efforts in the past to produce such documents of rights. Actually, Nehru mind went back to history. That is about, he spoke about what, that the French Revolution, Russian Revolution, where we discuss about the rights. Now, Nehru's here one extract is given in the textbook. That is, we are not going to just copy. One excerpt is given about Nehru that I will read later. So I am continuing the chapter. So Nehru's speech, or I can say, first I will read the speech. See, I am reading the speech. You please listen carefully. Listen carefully, or you can watch from the textbook also. Nehru's speech. What Nehru said in this speech, he spoke that his mind went back to the past historical events when he remembered the French Revolution. The French Revolution was fought on the basis of 3 ideals: liberty, equality, fraternity. Okay, so he recollected those past events. So here one excerpt is given here in page number 411. That is, we are not going just to copy. We are not copying the features of various constitutions in our Indian Constitution. We are not simply copying the good features of all the constitutions of the world into our Indian Constitution. It's not like that. Okay, he explained in his speech. Listen. This is what Nehruji said in his famous speech on 13th December 1946 in the Constituent Assembly. Listen. My mind goes back to the various Constituent Assemblies that have gone before and of what took place at the making of the great American nation, when the fathers of that nation met and fashioned out a constitution which has stood the test of so many years, more than a century and a half, and of the great nation which has resulted, which has been built upon the basis of that constitution. My mind goes back to that mighty revolution which took place also over 150 years ago, and to that Constituent Assembly that met in that gracious and lovely city of Paris, that is after French Revolution, which was fought so many battles for freedom, to the difficulties that the Constituent Assembly had and how the king and the other authorities came in its way, and still it continued. The House will remember that when these difficulties came, and even the room for meeting was designed to the Dardan Constituent Assembly, the betook themselves to an open tennis court, that is Bastille Court, and met there and took the oath, that Bastile's oath, which is called the oath of tennis court. Yes, the tennis court oath. The tennis court oath is one of the events of the French Revolution. That they continued meeting in spite of kings, in spite of the others, and did not disperse till they had finished the task they had undertaken. Well, I trust that it is in that solemn spirit that we too are meeting here in the Constituent Assembly, and that we too, whether we meet in this chamber or other chambers, or in the fields or in the marketplace, will go on meeting and continue our work till we have finished it. This is the speech. Still it continued. Then my mind goes back to more recent revolution which gave rise to a new type of state. The revolution that took place in Russia, that is Russian Revolution, which took place in 1917, and out of which has arisen the union of Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR. Another mighty country which is playing a tremendous part in the world today. Not only a mighty country, but for us in India, a neighboring country also, because Tajikistan, Turkmenistan are very close to India. So our mind goes back to these examples and we seek to learn from their success and to avoid their failures. We will learn their success and failures both, but we will adopt those success stories so that we can avoid our failures. Perhaps we may not able to avoid failures because some measure to failure is inherent in human effort. Sometimes failures are common because humans are making effort. In their effort, sometimes they may get failures also. Nevertheless, we shall advance, and I am sure, in spite of obstructions and difficulties, and achieve and realize the dream that we have dreamt so long. We say that it is our firm and solemn resolve to have an independent sovereign republic. India is bound to be sovereign. It is bound to be independent. It is bound to be a republic. Now, some friends have raised the question. Some of the people in the Constituent Assembly, they raised the question. Okay, why have you not put in the word democratic here? Some of the members of the Constituent Assembly, they raised the question that why he has not used the word democratic here. Well, I told them that it is conceivable, of course, that a republic may not be democratic, but the whole of our past is witness to this fact that we stand for democratic institutions. Obviously, we are aiming at democracy and nothing less than a democracy. What form of democracy, what shape it might take is another matter. The democracies of the present day, many of them in Europe and elsewhere, have played a great part in the world's progress. Okay, yet it may be doubtful in those democracies may not have to change their shape somewhat before long if they have to remain completely democratic. We are not going just to copy, I hope, a certain democratic procedure or an institution of a so-called democratic country. We may improve upon it. In any event, whatever system of government we may establish here must fit in with it must fit with the temper of our people and be acceptable to them. We stand for democracy. Okay, it will be for this house to determine what shape to give to the democracy. Okay, it will be for the house. It will be for this house to determine what shape to be give the democracy, the fullest democracy. I hope the house will notice that in this resolution, although we have not used the word democratic because we thought it is obvious that the word republic contains the word, and we did not want to use unnecessarily words and redundant words. But we have done something much more than the using the word. We have given the content of democracy in this resolution, and not only the content of democracy but the content, if I may say so, of economic democracy in this resolution. Others might take objections of this resolution on the ground that we have not said that it should be a socialist state. Well, I stand for socialism, and I hope India will stand for socialism. That's why I told you Nehru always supported socialism. Okay, and that India will also go towards the constitution of socialistic state. One of the features is there that India wanted to establish a socialistic pattern of society. I do believe that the whole world will have to go that way. So this is the speech given by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on 13th December 1946 in the Constituent Assembly. Yes, Nehru's speech merits careful scrutiny. What exactly was being stated here? What did Nehruji's seemingly nostalgic return to the past reflect? What was he saying about the origin of the ideas embodied in the vision of the Constitution? In returning to the past and referring to the American and French resolutions, Nehru was locating the history of constitution making in India with a longer history of struggle for liberty and freedom. The momentous nature of the Indian project was emphasized by linking to the revolutionary moments in the past. But Nehru was not suggesting that those events were to provide any blueprint for the present, or that the ideas of those revolutions could be mechanically borrowed and applied to India. Okay, he did not define the specific form of democracy and suggested that this had to be decided through deliberations. And he stressed that the ideas and provisions of the constitution introduced in India could not be just derived from elsewhere. We are not going to just copy, again I am repeating, we are not just going to copy, said the system of government established in India, he declared, had to fit in with the temper of our people and be acceptable to them. It was necessary to learn from the people of the West, from their achievements and failures. But the Western nations too had to learn from experiments elsewhere. The objective of the objective of the Indian Constitution would be to fuse the liberal ideas of democracy with the socialist idea of economic justice and readapt and rework all these ideas within the Indian context. Nehru's plea was for creative thinking about what appropriate for India. I mean, he wanted to decide that what is necessary for a country like India. So he was thinking a lot. So that's why he expressed his feelings in the speech, referring all the revolutions, historical revolutions, and also the Western nations, their achievements and their failures. Now we are moving to another topic, that is the will of the people. What people want. The will of the people. What people want. That was given. So here the will of the people. I want to mention here one important person name, that is a communist member. A communist member was there whose name was Somnath Lahiri. A communist member was there whose name was Somnath Lahiri, saw the dark hand of British imperialism hanging over the deliberations of the Constituent Assembly. He saw in a different way. He said that I saw the dark hand of British imperialism hanging over the Constituent Assembly. That means the Britishers only advised and suggested the Indians to form the Constituent Assembly. He thought that it was created by them, so it will work for them. So his thinking was quite different. So the Somnath Lahiri, a communist leader, saw the dark hand of the British that is hanging over on the Constituent Assembly. He thus urged the members. That's why he requested this person. He requested all the Constituent Assembly members, and India also he requested. Not only requested the Constituent Assembly members, but also Indians in general, to fully free themselves from the influence of imperial rule. That means he said that India should be completely free from the imperialistic rule of the Britishers. We should work for what? Freedom. We should be free from the imperial rule of the British. He urged with the Constituent Assembly members and all the Indians in general. In winter of 1946-47, as the assembly deliberated, when the assembly met, discussions were held, the British were still in India. When the Constituent Assembly was met in 1946-47, at the time, still Britishers were there in India. That's why this person got doubt, Somnath Lahiri. An interim administration, an interim government was formed, which was headed by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru ji, but it could only operate under the directions of the Viceroy and the British government in London. The interim government was formed under the leadership of Pandit Nehru, but this interim government should work will work and operate only on the directions of the Viceroy. Who was the last Viceroy? Lord Mountbatten, and also the British government which is there in London. Somnath Lahiri exhorted his colleagues to realize that the Constituent Assembly was British made and was working the British plans as the British should like it to be worked out in India. That means he says that this is the direction, this Constituent Assembly is working on the directions of the British government, British Viceroy. so it will work as per their directions, so it is not correct. That's why you oppose that one. Nehruji admitted the most nationalist leaders and wanted a different kind of constitutional assembly. Nehruji admitted the most nationalist leaders and wanted a different kind of constitutional assembly. Yes, it was also true in a sense that British government had a hand in its birth, and it had attached certain conditions within which the Constitutional Assembly had to function. Yes, Nehruji agreed with Somnath Lahiri and also other nationalist leaders that at present the Constitutional Assembly is working under the directions of the British government, British Viceroy. But he emphasized what? You must not ignore the source from which this assembly derives its strength. I mean, the idea of forming this Constitutional Assembly, the idea was given by the Britishers only. That's why today we are able to form this Constitutional Assembly. The source of strength in framing this assembly was from the Britishers. We should not forget that one. So Nehru added these lines. See, government do not come into being by state papers. Governments do not come into being, do not come into existence by state papers. Governments are in fact the expression of the will of the people. We have met here today because of the strength of the people behind us. Okay, and we shall go far as far as the people, not only any party or group, but the people as a whole, shall wish us to go. We should therefore always keep in mind the passions that lie in the hearts of the masses, of the Indian people, and try to fulfill them. So in this way, Nehru suggested. Now, the Constituent Assembly was expected to express the aspirations of those who had participated in the movement of independence. Those people who participated in the Indian independence movement, so all those people's aspirations were taken into consideration while framing the constitution. Democracy, equality and justice were the ideals that had become intimately associated with the social struggles in India since the 19th century. When the social reformers in the 19th century opposed child marriages and demanded that widow to be allowed to remarry, they were pleading for social justice. When Swami Vivekananda campaigned for the reform of Hinduism, he wanted religious to become more just, more truth. When Jyotiba Phule is from Maharashtra, pointed to the sufferings of the depressed caste, or Jyotiba Phule, he pointed the sufferings of the depressed caste people. Similarly, or communist and socialist who organized workers and peasants, organizations, they were demanding economic and social justice also. The national movement against a government that was seen as oppressive and illegitimate was inevitably a struggle for democracy and justice, for citizens' rights and equality. That means Nehru wanted to consider all those people's aspirations. He wanted to consider all those things while framing the constitution. He has taken into consideration Swami Vivekananda's views, Jyotiba Phule's views, all the communist and socialist leaders' views, and also the social reformers' views. In fact, as the demand for representation grew, the British has been forced to introduce a series of constitutional reforms. A number of acts were passed, that is 1909 Act, 1919 Act and 1935 Act, gradually enlarging the space for Indian participation in provincial governments. The executive was made partly responsible to the provincial legislatures in 1919 Act and almost entirely so under the Government of India Act 1935. Actually, the present constitution, I can say, the present constitution is fully based on the Government of India Act 1935. Once I told you, the present government is fully based, the Indian constitution which was prepared was fully based on the Government of India Act 1935. When the elections were held in 1937, I told you the last British elections in India, the last British elections in India were held in 1937. At the time, the percentage voting was only 14%, and at the time, the voting right was given only to the rich people, the the educated people, the English-knowing people, and the taxpayers. Okay, under the Act 1935. I mean, the last British elections were held in India in 1937, based on the Government of India in 1935. The Congress came to power in 8 out of 11 provinces that we have studied. 11 provinces were there, and Congress swept in all 8 provinces. Yet we should not see an unbroken continuity between the earlier constitutional developments and what happened in the 3 years from 1946. While the earlier constitutional experiments were in response to the growing demand for representative government, I mean, there was a growing demand by all the Constitutional Assembly members. There is a growing demand by all the Constituent Assembly members that we want a representative form of democracy. The Acts of 1909, the 1919 Act, and the 1935 Act were not directly debated and formulated by Indians. They were enacted by the colonial government. All the above acts, that is 1909 Act, which is called Minto-Morley Reforms Act, 1919 Act, which is called Montague-Chelmsford Reforms. I repeat, 1909 Act, which is passed by the British government, 1919 Act also, and 1935 Act also. All the 3 acts are passed by the British government. Here 1909 Act is called Minto-Morley Reforms. Lord Minto was initiated that one. 1919 Act was initiated by, that is, Montague-Chelmsford, and 1935 Act, that is by the British government. They were enacted by the colonial government. The electorate means what? Body of voters. Here electorate means body of voters that elected the provincial bodies had expanded over the years. I mean, the number of voters were increased day by day over all elections. But even in 1935, it remained limited to not more than 10 to 15%. I told you 14%. Only the adult population was given right to vote. There was no universal adult franchise at the time. In the last British elections that was held in 1937, at the time the elections were not held on the basis of universal adult franchise. Okay. The legislatures elected under 1935 Act operated within the framework of colonial rule and were responsible to the governor appointed by the British. The vision of the Nehru was trying to outline on 13 December 1946 was the constitution of an independent sovereign republic of India. So this was the thing. Up to here I am stopped here, and I will continue the next topic, that is defining rights, in the next period. Okay students, so I suggest you to read once the textbook so that you can understand the topics better. Thank you students. Stay safe.